How is making video game soundtracks different than doing movie scores? How does one get the inspiration to make the kind of music that will fit the game you're working on? Passion is great and all, but can you make a decent living as a video game music composer? You'll find answers to these questions and much more in this episode of our podcast.
That's the thing. Back then, the only thing that I had at my disposal was my passion for music and for video games. Video games are non-linear media, and basically the same pieces of music are going to be played many times. And this needs to be taken into account if you would like the music not to be intrusive, but at the same time needs to be pleasant and needs to be entertaining and needs to be supporting the gameplay experience. I was told that I got a chance to work with Hans. I got a phone call back then from my audio director and my boss at that time, who phoned me on the call and said, "Bobby, I have an amazing news for you, you know. We're gonna work with the legendary Hans Zimmer."
Welcome to another podcast from the SFI IT Festival series. My name is Greg and I'm going to be hosting this conversation. And in the studio with us, we have the composer of music to, among other things, Crysis 2 and 3 and Divinity Original Sin 2, with his most recent project being Baldurs Gate 3. Hello, Borislav Slavov. Nice to meet you.
Hello, guys. Hello, Greg. It's really nice to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me for this interview. It's a pleasure. You know, guys, that yeah, I love Poland, and basically every single year I take my chance to go to visit this beautiful country, and I have a lot of friends there. So it's always a pleasure for me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So I think we're gonna just jump right in, because what listeners are interested in is your input on the video game music. So I'd just start at the beginning. Let's say, how did you begin? What got you into video game music? How did you get your start?
Well, I always loved playing video games, and I always wanted to become a musician. When I was a little kid, I was dreaming to become a rock and roll star, as you can imagine, like every little boy. And the moment I realized that this was never going to happen, I had to fix my dream in a way that it was still going to be possible to be fulfilled in a way.
Ouch.
And combining my dream about music and video games, I decided to combine these two passions of mine. And that was the moment I realized that to do so, I just need to start developing myself as a video game composer. It was many, many years ago, maybe more than 20 years ago. And my adventure started back then with a real-time strategy game called Knights of Honor, which was my very first project. And ever since, my adventure in the video game industry never stops.
And how did you get your first project?
I believe that back then, when I was when I heard about a brand new company which is going to develop a strategy game, I got in contact with the guys, and I said, "Guys, I really would like to give me a chance. Please give me a chance, so that I'd like to show you what I'm capable of." And they gave me a really nice big smile, and that was it. But I was really serious, so I got back home. I remember that I took all my money that I had back then in my bank account to buy music gear, music production gear. It was quite modest, as you can imagine, back then. And I started to compose the first couple of pieces. When these pieces were ready, I presented them to the company. They loved it and decided to hire me for the entire score, luckily for me. So basically, that was the very start of my adventure in the video game industry.
But did you have some formal music education, or did you just play around with software and instruments? And
that's the thing. Back then, the only thing that I had at my disposal was my passion for music and for video games. So to answer your question, the funny thing is that I'm a master of computer science by education, which means that I studied computer science. And as a matter of fact, I had just finished my education back then in the university. I was a master of computer science, and I was even working in one of the biggest software company in the world. But you know that you cannot escape your heart. I couldn't escape my passion, and there was a moment when I woke up in the morning and I realized, okay, I cannot run away anymore. I just need to follow my heart, and this is basically what I did. I applied for my first job, and luckily for me, I got hired. So no, I don't have a formal musical education in a music academy. Everything that I learned through private lessons and through experience.
Oh, so some courses like private license, or?
You mean formal courses? No,
Yeah.
no. I don't think that
No.
formal courses would do any good. You should either go for the real thing, music academy, or you should just try to educate and get the experience. But I was really lucky back then, because right at the start of my career, I had a chance to work with professionals who were very kind and very nice to me, and they walked me through step by step the entire process. So that was a really, really huge luck and help, which gave me the chance to truly start develop myself as a professional.
Okay, so I've heard that you have a particular approach to scoring video games. So would you like to discuss for a bit how scoring and making music for video games is different than making music for any other media, say film? Like what techniques do you use to account for the replayability or the interactivity?
Yeah, scoring a movie is a completely different process to a certain degree, of course, because video games are non-linear media, and basically the same pieces of music are going to be played many times, and this needs to be taken into account if you would like the music not to be intrusive, but at the same time needs to be pleasant and needs to be entertaining and needs to be supporting the gameplay experience, which puts the challenge on a whole different level. So from one perspective, it needs to be very high quality, but at the same time, it should be able to be played many times, sometimes hundreds of times, before it runs you crazy. And for me, that's the most challenging thing: how to compose piece of music which you can play on repeat hundreds of times without, losing its power or becoming an intrusive element in your gameplay, rather than the other way around, elevating and improving your gameplay experience. So composing for video games is a different thing. The second thing is that you need to be very careful, because you need to carefully implement climaxes in your music, again due to the same reason, because the same piece of music the same piece of music is going to be played many times, and if you put a specific very easily recognized climaxes in your compositions, you can easily put the player into an annoying, intrusive situation, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are what I'm trying to say is that there are very simple yet specific and quite challenging requirements when it comes to composing, producing, and implementing music for video games. That's why I try to approach the composition process a little bit differently, and I'm not. I don't try to make the music very how to put it in English. I'd rather try to do something more minimalistic, but at the same time very emotional, rather than going for something really big in scope, but at the same time having a lot of different climaxes, dynamics, which at the end are going to be very hard to be implemented in a video game.
That probably has its place, right?
Yeah, of course. Luckily for us, the video game composers, nowadays there are plenty of so-called cinematics, cutscenes, which required music, which is pretty much absolutely the same like the movies. That's right. So basically, I believe that we are quite blessed in that regard, because we don't only have our personal challenges coming directly from the video game world, but also we have a chance to score a pretty much full-time flick every single game we score. I remember that one of the games that I worked on, it was called Crysis, Son of Rome. The sum of all cutscenes in the entire game was pretty much a full-time movie for the Roman Empire. So what I'm saying here is that we have both sides of the coin here. Fully interactive music, which requires following a very specific rules, and then the other side of the coin, we have plenty of cutscenes to score, which are pretty much very similar, if not the same, like music production from the movie industry.
But still, apparently your songs or music managed to be recognizable enough to actually get its own live orchestra concert, from what I've heard.
Yeah, I'm very happy that especially lately, the people, the gamers all over the world are very keen on attending live orchestra performances and really enjoy listening to their favorite video game music. This makes me very, very happy, and one of the things you should be proud of being there in the beautiful Poland is that one of the most amazing, beautiful, and exciting video game music festivals is basically being organized in Poland.
Yes, the Game Music friends, Festival.
That's
Shout
right.
out to them.
That's right. These are amazing people, the GameMusic.pl, my dear friends, and I simply can't wait to meet them again.
Yes, I've been on several of those concerts. I can recommend them a lot. So, but circling back to video games and video game music, you have, in the context of movies, say, worked with Hans Zimmer, for example. So how was that?
Well, that was, of course, a highlight in my career. It was a very exciting time in my career. I have a very clear memory the moment I was told that I got a chance to work with Hans. I got a phone call back then from my audio director and my boss at that time, a Hollywood veteran called Campbell Askew, who phoned me on the call and said, "Bobby, I have an amazing news for you, you know. We're gonna work with the legendary Hans Zimmer." And I couldn't believe it first because, as you can imagine, even though he had worked on some other video games at that time, it was not very often. You cannot see, or rather hear the legendary Hans Zimmer working in the video game industry. And the moment I realized that basically he was going to work with me on a big scope AAA video game like Crysis 2 was a dream coming true. And we got a plane, we traveled to LA, we spent some time with Hans in the legendary studio of Remote Control, which is an amazing experience and a moment in my life. It basically looks like a museum of film music scoring, full of exciting elements from a lot of different movies which Hans had scored over the years. We spent some time together to discuss the currently existing score, and then to decide what was going to be the direction of the themes which Hans was going to compose, produce, and provide for the game. So yeah, what can I say? A real highlight for me.
Yeah, but certainly, like, working with a big composer like that has its drawbacks. Like, For example, how creative are you allowed to get, not only in this situation, but in your job in general? Like, do you get a situation where you want to make something and you make a piece of music, and then some studio executive comes up and says, "No, we're not feeling this. You have to change it"? Or
You're talking about my work with Hans, or in general?
Let's start with work with Hans, and then with general.
With Hans, it was a little bit. It was not a little bit, but quite different situation, because the main score was already produced back then. So basically, the main body of the score was done and approved, and was even implemented back then. And when we went to Hans to meet him, we wanted to discuss, and we discussed and basically worked only on the main themes he was going to provide back then. So the process was different. The music was ready, the main part of the music, and we just needed Hollywood quality epic themes to give the frames of the entire score. And as you know, Hans is quite well known for giving this legendary big epic quality to every score he touches.
That's his thing.
Exactly, and this is exactly what happened. We spent some time together. We had discussions, working meetings, and at the end, we were all happy when we managed to nail down the direction. And as a result of it, Hans nailed it with really epic, I'd say, legendary main themes for the franchise. Going back to your question, in general, of course, it's a challenge to work with different people. But the thing is that the most important thing is to try to understand the vision of your director. So if you manage to fully understand your vision, and if you have the chance to stay close to the producers and to the directors, to the people who create the video game, this is not a big challenge, because usually these are very these people are known for their clear vision and decision making, and there are a lot of question marks. Once you manage to nail down the first couple of pieces, is what I'm trying to say. And then from this point on, it's easy. It's just go on and provide the entire score. The start is basically the challenge, because you need to synchronize your creativity with the vision coming from the director. That's
so there is like a lot of cutting off of propositions at the beginning. Like you get declined and say you need to change this or that.
In my case, no, because I usually come on board when the director is already familiar with what I'm capable to deliver. At least when I look back into my past and my experience, that was always the case. So the moment, because basically I'm hired by the director, like 99% of the cases, when I look back into my past, it's always the director who hires me, and the director makes a well-informed decision who I am, what am I capable of delivering. So basically, a lot of this challenge is already it's overcome. It's not on the table anymore. Then we just need to sit down to start discussing different ideas. Then I compose couple of pieces, produce them properly, and once the director is happy, the challenge is no longer there. I just go back to my music layer with all the freedom in the world
and play
around it and deliver the rest of the score. So to summarize, basically for me, from my perspective and according to my experience, the very beginning is the challenge. The moment you first manage to convince the director that you are the right person for the score, that's the biggest challenge. And the second one is to compose and produce the first couple pieces of music which basically prove that the director took the right decision to hire you on board. From this point on, once you manage to to get the trust, I never have any problem.
Okay, but you still need to like take into account the vision that they have. Like you need to know what type of game it is. Like
of course,
how
this is always the
players
case.
are going to interact.
Of course, it goes without saying that I always need to stick to the vision and stick to the direction given from the creators of the video game, and that's of course the most important thing, because we are a team. We are supposed following the vision of our creative lead to deliver a coherent and exciting new game. And to be able to do so, we all need to follow and to be focused on the same vision and direction. So yes, that's correct.
Okay, so let's.
I cannot do whatever I like. I mean, completely, of course. Of course.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet, anyway. But the beauty of it is that there is still a lot of space for experimentation and for exploration, and there are plenty of chances and time to reinvent and to come up with new and interesting ideas, which you can put in the mix, and together with the rest of the ingredients, achieve the vision.
Yeah, I have noticed that, I don't know if it's just my observation, but music for video games seems to get more creative with instrumentation and with different ideas than, say, film music.
Absolutely agree, and I can tell you why that is the case. The case is that in the video game industry, in general, there are a lot more freedom and a lot more. The people are way more courageous. That's my personal opinion, of course, but I think that in the movies and in Hollywood in general, there is a tendency that a lot of the guys there use so-called temp tracks. I don't know if you are familiar with this term, but it basically means that right at the start of the movie, the producer, the director, and the executives in general, they tell the composer to follow music from specific style, just by giving him or her examples taken from other movies. So basically, temp track is something that is being done in advance with music taken from other movies, and this is very annoying, and this is very limiting when it comes to creativity, because if you are given a temp track before you even start your creative process, you can imagine that your freedom is very limited, and it's way harder for you to be creative, to be innovative, and to come up with something new, fresh, and exciting at the same time. Going back to the video game industry, it's a completely different story, at least from my perspective again. There are still practices to use temp tracks in some video game companies, but I consider myself quite lucky that I never been in a situation when somebody gave me temp tracks to follow. And I believe that in most of the cases, this is it. My fellow colleagues, my fellow composers in the video game industry, they have a lot more creative freedom. And this is why your observation is quite right. My colleagues use this freedom to the maximum, and they explore, they experiment, they try different things. And at the end of the day, I dare saying that video game music is way more exciting, way more often.
I do agree.
That's because, my fellow composers are given the creative freedom to excite themselves first, and then to reflect this excitement in the music. they are composing and producing.
Yeah, I know that's a part of the reason why some of them stick with indie studios or smaller studios, smaller games, because there's even more freedom.
Exactly.
Like I know Austin
Exactly.
Wintory, for example.
Yes.
I absolutely adore Austin Wintory, and he
Yep.
always sticks to like indie studios with small exceptions.
The freedom
Just
in the indie studios, of course, is the biggest there, because the people there are very passionate, very brave, and the business part hasn't taken such a big chunk of their focus, at least not yet. At some point, you become so big that you need to start taking into consideration a lot of different business details, and more or less these influences, and it has a big impact on the freedom, on the creative freedom, not only about the music production but in general. But yeah, you're quite right, and I believe that that's the case. The indie studios provide the biggest creative freedom for us, the video game composers.
And the biggest financial risk if you take it.
Yeah, but you know that if you want to come up with something really exciting and interesting and new, you can rarely do this without any risk taken, right? And the indie studios, they're not thinking so much about the risk. They're way more focused not on the failure, but on the on the passion and on the idea, and that's the beauty of it.
Okay, so let's like advance to a sort of section for aspiring composers. Like, do you have any tips for people who want to get started in the business?
I think that everyone who is passionate about music and video games in the same time should not be afraid to jump and to give it a shot. As I told you, 20 years ago, I was a master of computer science, and 20 years later, I'm a professional composer with more than 15 orchestral scores, and uh, I don't even know the exact number of the music that I composed and produced so far. And I believe I'm a pretty good example for everyone out there that you guys, you should not be afraid, even if you don't have a formal education, even if you don't know every single detail, even if you don't know who to get in contact with. The most important thing for everyone, each and every one of you guys, is to stay faithful to yourself and to follow your passion. And now, to give you some specific tips, what I would advise is just first do a research. Um, do a research and find independent developers, indie developers who share same passion for video games and music, who share same style. Because let's say that you might be quite a versatile in terms of composing and producing music, but I believe that each and every one of us has favorite style, right? So my advice is identify your favorite style, the style you feel more confident and comfortable with. Compose few pieces of music, let's say in a high fantasy style. Then do a research and find independent developers who develop video games in a high fantasy style. Get in contact with these nice people. Offer your heart, offer your help, offer your passion. Give them a hand without talking about money at the beginning, because they are in the same situation like you. Establish a good, friendly contact. This is the very first step, and it's going to be your foundation for everything from this point on, because it's going to help you to learn the industry, to get the details, to establish some professional relationship with these guys. And you never know if the very first game you're going to work on, if it might turn to be the next big hit. So that would be my advice. And this is basically how I started.
And sorry to bring it a bit down to earth, but I imagine some people are very interested in that. In how well are you able to support yourself as a video game music composer? Like,
That's a
are
pretty
you
good
able
question.
to live of that?
That's a pretty good question. No, that's not possible at the beginning. So that's a really practical and good question. At the beginning, I was working, as I told you, in a big software company. And I was developing at the same time as a video game composer, but it was my side job. I was building my relationships. I was getting familiar with the industry. I was learning how to produce music professionally. And it took me a good 6, maybe 7 years before I was able to sustain and to make a living out of my work as a video game composer. And that's basically the trickiest part. You should know this. Everyone should know this. Unless you have a really brilliant chance, unless you have a good buddy who can put you in directly on board of a video game with a big enough budget for for music, you should all be well aware that it's a slow process which requires your patience and your consistency and passion, of course. But going back to your question, at the beginning, no, the first years I wasn't able to make a living out of it. I had to had another job to support myself and my family, and composing music for video games was my second job. But again, it's a matter of passion, of consistency, and of course a pinch of luck. But I can promise you, if you are passionate enough and if you're consistent and if if you keep your passion alive and if you don't give up, it's just a matter of time before you come to the moment you realize that you're fully there.
So, but it probably helps to get like a job in something video game adjacent or music adjacent, somewhere in the area, like not to get the contacts, for example.
I'm not sure I got the question.
Like it's probably useful to get a job that is somewhere in the area of video games.
Yes. Yes, that's correct. So if you like to fasten the process, of course, it's way better to find a job maybe like a sound designer or maybe something that anything that can help you to put the foot in the door so that you can start learning what it's all about. But I believe that the very first advice that I mentioned, get in touch with small independent developers and at the beginning offer your passion and your help, is still the best one, because nobody's going to turn you back, and to say no to your beautiful music if you're not asking for money, right? And that's a very good start, because your music is going to get its audience. Maybe this independent developer is going to make another bigger, better, more exciting and more successful game, and the wheel of time and the wheel of experience start cycling, right? So the most important thing is to start learning the industry, to start building your network, your contacts, and of course, last but definitely not least, to start building your track record, which is going to help you with your next gig and your next job.
So do you have like a portfolio page or something that you expose your things on?
I don't have to anymore, but at the beginning,
well,
yes.
You don't have to.
I mean, it sounded wrong. What I meant was that
no, I mind.
That I no longer, try to keep everything in a single page, because the people I work with, we have quite a good relationships for many, many years, and they know me so well that they don't have to look back into my page. That's what I wanted to say, that I have a well-established and pretty good network, which helps me. And whenever I want to get in contact with somebody in my network, I just need to drop him a message. And these are quite a few years, more than 20 years. We've met and worked many times. So I doubted that even if I had a page with my track record, anyone would go and look into it.
Okay, so like one last sort of question as tips for maybe people who already got into composing or are trying their hand at it. Like, do you have any tips on how to get inspiration for your music, or do you like listen to other composers? Do you get inspired by, say, musicians or bands to make music?
I think that every composer has his or her own ways of getting inspired. I can tell you mine. For instance, I love, of course, listening to music. It goes without saying that when you enjoy listening to a beautiful piece of music, it triggers emotions. It provokes emotions, and those emotions are the very foundation for my desire and passion to start composing and producing music. That's, of course, one of those ways. Another way to inspire myself is to play a video game that I like. Every time I'm excited about a video game I play, I feel this internal urge to start composing and producing music. I don't know if it's just me or anyone else, but if I truly enjoy a video game that I play, it always gives me the desire and the urge and the inspiration to go back to composing board and come up with something really cool and nice ideas. Another way to inspire myself is to get my black Labrador. I have a really beautiful black bitch, which I love so much. And I live pretty close to a forest. It's literally within a walking distance. And we tend to have long, beautiful walks together with my black Labrador. So I just get inspired by enjoying the beautiful vistas and immersing myself in the beauty and the splendor of the nature around my home. Another way to inspire myself is to read a book on the topic, on a similar topic. If I'm to compose a fantasy music, it's really nice and it helps quite a lot to read a fantasy book, for instance. So these are, the first ways that comes to mind when I think about it, when I ask myself how I get inspired. But the most important thing is keeping close to your project. Get familiar with the details. Talk to your creative director. Talk to your fellow colleagues. Always exchange ideas. Don't hesitate. Whenever an idea comes to your mind, never hesitate to share the idea, no matter how crazy it might sound. Never. Because the most beautiful compositions of mine were born because of sharing my ideas and talking and discussing my ideas with my fellow colleagues. Whenever I have a really crazy idea, I just go there, share it, discuss it. Then something else is being born as a result. And at the end of the day, I have something really interesting to start with. I can give a lot of examples, and Divinity Original Sin 2 is a pretty good case. When I look back, I believe that the most beautiful and memorable and well-received compositions were born as a result of being inspired by my fellow colleagues at Larian Studios.
Yeah, but when you sit down and like begin the process, do you have already some melody or idea in your mind, or do you just sort of noodle around on
I have the emotion
instrument? And
I have the emotion. The most important thing for me to sit down and start the composing process is I need to feel the emotion inside. I never start composing and producing music without being excited in a way. I need to have a strong emotion. So the most important thing for me is to provoke, to become emotional about something, about specific cutscene, about specific situation, about specific character, about specific area, if you like. So the most important thing is I need to get emotional about it.
That can't always be easy.
Sorry?
That can't always be easy, right?
For me, yeah, I would say so. Of course, there are days you might feel totally down and you don't feel like composing, but you have always plenty of other things to do, things and work to do, like mixing, implementing. But when it comes to composing, when it comes to starting the very start of the creative process, I need to get emotional, and this is the moment where talking to my colleagues helps me a lot, because they give me concept art, they give me screenshots, they show me demo of their work, they give me ideas, then I share my crazy idea, they give me feedback, and then I say, okay, I have it, I'm there, I feel it, now would be the right time to start the creative process and
and quickly have to run to the
exactly,
and
that's correct,
record it while it's there.
While it's there, precisely.
Okay, so I think that would pretty much wrap up our conversation, unless there's something you want to say about your current project of Baldur's Gate.
Baldur's Gate 3 is the biggest and the most exciting project in my career thus far. I can tell you that in the early access, so far, 5 hours of music I already composed and produced. And this is merely the beginning. So you can imagine what we are talking about here. It's huge in every meaning of the word. It's a very deep, exciting, and epic game. And I can promise you, if you like playing role-playing games, and especially if you are into Dungeons and Dragons, you're gonna love this one. I can promise you.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh,
yeah.
Anything else?
Well, thank you for having me here, and I hope that we have a chance to meet in person.
Certainly hope so. If you ever come in Poland, contact us and we will get you. Maybe
I
on the
will
next edition of the
do it.
Festival, or we'll see. So anyway, Thank you very much for the conversation, Borislav, and thank you to the audience for listening. Stay tuned for the Baldur's Gate 3 game, and be sure to check out our other podcasts, for example, where I discuss environment art with Blizzard's Thiago Klapke. And goodbye.
Bye-bye.